Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special episode of Analyzing Finance with Nick. This is going to be the first of a series where I talk about the economic future of various U.S. states. I'm recording this live in Scottsdale, Arizona. We'll be doing many more of them across the country, and I'm going to use this opportunity to record some of these series of the places I go and discuss the economic futures of those places. I've done it for countries, and now I'm going to bring it on to the state level. The only state we've really covered so far is California, and I've done several videos about California, including a January live stream about Los Angeles post-California fires. And really, just to do the TLDR version, is that California has the natural resources, the human capital, the entrepreneurial spirit to be successful, but is being held down by bad policy. And it'll eventually get its act together and rebrand and reform its economy to be one of the better and most competitive places in America. Probably take some economic pain that causes enough of a political shift to really realign the California economy. So the first one outside of California we're going to do is Arizona. And Arizona has a lot of interesting dynamics. On one hand, it's a state that has been rapidly growing, but on the other hand, it's not really a core driver of the U.S. economy. In fact, it's really just more of a beneficiary of success elsewhere. First, let's go into the economic history of Arizona. Arizona was ceded to the U.S. as part of the Treaty of the Guadalupe Hidalgo after the Mexican-American War. After that, a large portion of southern Arizona was acquired later in 1853 as part of the Gadsden Purchase. It was kind of a backwater because the extreme heat of the Arizona summers made it pretty much uninhabitable for most people to live here. Arizona was one of the last states, I think the 48th state to be admitted in the United States in 1912, and it generally just had not much going on. A little bit of farming, some mining, particularly of copper, but really what caused Arizona to boom was the invention of affordable air conditioning. In 1950, Metro Phoenix had a little bit over 100,000 people in population, and today it has over 4.4 million in population, and it spreads a much larger geographic area than it did back then too, and has become the fifth largest city, Phoenix, and I think the top 10 in terms of metropolitan areas in the United States. What drove this growth? A lot of it really was just residential construction. People built a lot of houses here, mainly because the weather was warm, particularly in the winter. Like a lot of the original migrants to Arizona in the late 20th century were from the Chicagoland area and other parts of the Midwest, just mainly to escape the cold. The other driver is retirees. Arizona was built on the back of a lot of retirees moving here from other states to get out of the cold, or at least get out of the cold during the winter, and because the summers still are rather unpleasant here. That's why I scheduled the tour in the wintertime. Arizona was relatively affordable back then, so it was easy to have one house in the Midwest and one property here in Arizona. You would rotate between the seasons, known as snowbirds. The snowbird economy was the initial impetus to developing Arizona, and if you look at as a percentage of GDP, construction, home building are still one of the biggest drivers of the Arizona economy. Since then, it has begun to diversify, especially in the 21st century. You now have a lot of technology moving in. You have things such as Intel and TSMC building semiconductor plants out here in the desert. You have just a emerging tourism scene for here. So like Scottsdale is a very popular winter destination. It's a great golf place too, so a lot of people come here for that. A lot of major sporting events such as the Fiesta Bowl, several Super Bowls, and spring training bring a lot of people into town, and the Phoenix Waste Management / Phoenix Open. And it also has the biotech industry developed out here as well. In terms of the demographic platform, it used to be primarily a retiree state, and it still has a higher percentage of retirees than the national average. It's 18.8% versus 17% for the national average. But it's not even in the top 5. Florida is in the top 5 at over 22% of its population being over 65, and the others are New England states. Arizona is not in the top 5. If you look at the demographics of people moving to Arizona, it's mostly younger people and upwardly mobile, higher income people coming from more expensive states, primarily California, but also from the Northeast, Colorado, and the Pacific Northwest. And they move here because, again, better weather and much lower cost of living. And the other real thing interesting is that among the post-2020 migration, over 20% has been people with remote jobs. A lot of people are trying to take advantage of cost of living arbitrage and come to Arizona to do that. So that's kind of a primer of really kind of what drives Arizona's economy. Income is close to national average. The main real risk for the Arizona economy is that Arizona is kind of a place where the prosperity of other parts of America gets invested into. Like if you make a lot of money somewhere else, you'll come to Arizona for vacation or buy a property in Arizona or maybe even retire in Arizona. Or if you have a high-paying job elsewhere, you move to Arizona for the next stage of your career for a lower cost of living and the option to work remote. However, Arizona is woefully lacking in terms of major global companies. It has 0 companies in the Fortune Global 500. The biggest companies in Arizona are Avnet and Freeport-McMoRan. They're the only 2 inside the Fortune US 400. They have 0 in the Fortune Global 500 and 0 in the S&P 500. A lot of companies don't really feel the need to headquarter in Arizona due to the retiree demographic, or people who move here for vacation or quality of life. It's not really a young emerging entrepreneur is going to come to Arizona necessarily to start a business like they would in California or Washington State. As a result, you don't see the mega companies here that you do in other parts of the West Coast. If a company wants to have a West Coast or a national headquarters in the western part of the country, it's more popular to do it in Los Angeles, San Francisco, or Seattle. But a lot of these big companies will move a large chunk of their staff to Arizona for certain things where it's not necessary for people to be at the headquarters in terms of more back office operations or manufacturing. And so you do have a lot of corporate presence here, but it's not really the top tier, or the global headquarters are based out here in Arizona. And so as a result, Arizona's economy is very cyclical and is at risk of economic weakness elsewhere in the U.S. hitting Arizona a lot harder than other parts of the country. So if California, Illinois, and Texas sneeze, Arizona catches the cold, because a lot of discretionary money comes to Arizona, whether it's retirees moving here, people going on golf trips and vacation here, or businesses expanding their operations into Arizona. So if you have an economic slowdown, a lot of the capital flows into Arizona are going to pull out relatively quickly or just halt entirely. And so that's a real danger for Arizona. That's also why the Phoenix real estate market historically is one of the most volatile in America. When economic times are good, people want to move to Arizona either because they're priced out of where they're from, or they have more money to buy a second home. And so real estate prices move up here really fast when the economy is good. But during downtimes in real estate, it pulls back just as hard, because unlike Colorado, which has the Rocky Mountains as a barrier, or California, which has the coast as a natural barrier, or the variance of climate. Like if you live on the coast in California, it's a much different lifestyle and a much different climate than if you live 40 miles inland. Whereas here in Metro Phoenix, it's basically hot year-round. The weather doesn't really differ that much. The far west side of Metro Phoenix versus the far east side of Metro Phoenix, or north or south, it's all desert, and environmentalists don't care as much about preserving a pretty dead desert environment, and so there's not as much political or geographical restrictions to building, and so the supply is not constrained, and that allows for a lot more development. And when therefore a lot more supply available when things are down. And so, yeah, it's great because it makes Arizona a relatively affordable place, and I think it will stay a relatively affordable place even if there's significant prosperity due to the availability of potential supply. For a real estate investor betting on appreciation, this is more of a trader's market than a investor's market. And the other risk, again, a lot of Arizona is driven by more discretionary industries, such as tourism, mining, which copper mining is a very pro-cyclical economic thing. Biotech may not be cyclical, but again, capital flows are somewhat cyclical. And construction, which is very cyclical, particularly residential construction. It makes Arizona probably one of the most volatile economies in America. The bright side is that Arizona is not as at risk of baby boomer attrition as other parts of America because its retiree population, as I mentioned before, is barely above the national average, and it's actually a lot of younger people moving here. However, if you do have more aggressive back to the office policies, you might see a lot of the more recent migrants to Arizona might be forced to move back to where the company's headquarters are, and that could put some possible downward economic and population pressure on Arizona. What are my thoughts on Arizona? It's a great place to play golf, and it's a fun place to go for New Year's, particularly because I think it has the best weather for New Year's Day in the United States. From an economic perspective, I think it will be the most volatile state along with Nevada in terms of economic prospects. It will continue to grow as long as the American population grows meaningfully. However, if housing prices materially corrected and stayed down in California, it could spell some long-term risk for Arizona. But I'm generally optimistic about Arizona because it has the most favorable pro-business environment in the western region of the U.S. and it's more skilled and educated workforce compared to Nevada. So that's a positive. I think it's probably going to be the strongest economy in the Southwest. However, I think the Southwest is a volatile region, and so I think Arizona's economy is going to be at risk for sharper recessions when things get bad elsewhere. Let me know what you think about this series, and should I do it about other states? Do you think that I'm right that Arizona is going to be one of the most cyclical economies in America? Do you think that I'm right to still be moderately positive about Arizona despite some potential headwinds? What are some things that might prove that Arizona might be a little bit more sustainable in terms of a more steady economy? Why is Arizona not attracting young talent who want to build businesses or corporations who want to put their headquarters here? That might be the biggest bottleneck for Arizona. If you're a young, ambitious person who wants to move up the ladder, Phoenix is not really the place to go. It's more of a place to relax after you've made your money. But is that going to change? What are your thoughts on this? Thank you for watching.